Okay, I'm going to call to order the City of Longmont's Transportation Advisory Board for February 12th. We can do a roll call.
Chair Lehner.
Here.
Board Member Bennett. Here. Board Member Wickland. Here. Vice Chair Mickey Burrows. Board Member McInerney. Here. Board Member Kim. Here. Council Member Yarbrough.
Fantastic. We've got a full house, right? All right, we need to move to number 3, approve minutes of the preceding meeting from January. Are there any comments or corrections from the minutes? I'll need a motion to approve then.
I move that we approve the minutes from January 2024.
Minutes approval seconded.
Great. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, approve the minutes. We'll move to communications from staff.
Great, thank you very much. Phil Greenwald, Transportation Planning Manager with the City of Longmont. Just checking in here with some items from us. First and foremost, we just really are excited to introduce to you the new Vision Zero coordinator for the City of Longmont. Her name is Cami Edson, and she'll be probably reaching out to a number of you regarding the Vision Zero task force that's coming up. She's doing a lot of outreach as well. I'll have her come up for just a second and kind of wave at you and introduce herself a little bit. If she doesn't mind. Maybe just give a little background as we kind of been doing.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Happy to be here. Cami Edson. So day 6 with the city. I come to you formally from Boulder County. I was with Boulder County Transportation for the last 10 years. And prior to that, I was with Boulder County Public Health. So I come from a public health background to this Vision Zero work, and I'm very excited to get to know all of you and work with all of you and all the wonderful staff here. And one of the first things I'm sure you all have heard about is I'll be working on putting together a task force that will eventually get us to an action plan this year that's going to go kind of right alongside the TMP work. So excited to jump in and get to know all of your thoughts a little bit more about what you see for Vision Zero and how we can work together. And yeah, get that communication going. So happy to be here. Yeah. Thanks.
The second item on the agenda, I might have to ask for a motion on this, but we did ask and poll all of you about moving the April meeting from April 8th to April 15th, and we didn't hear anybody who couldn't do that. So just wanted to kind of get your formal, maybe approval of that move, just so we can start to, with Diane's help, move that on all the different agendas that we need to do that with.
Okay, so we could probably just, we don't need to make a motion, we could probably just vote. Okay. All those in favor of moving April's meeting from what would be April 8th to April 15th, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Nope. Okay, I think we're good.
Great, and then also in your packet tonight is your updated work plan for 2024. We made the corrections you requested based on the meeting minute, on the minutes that were from the meeting, and then also our notes, making sure that we got everything covered that you had requested in your last meeting. So hopefully this is the final 2024 work plan, and if you have any questions or comments, feel free to email me or call me direct and we can chat about that. And if there's anything big, any big deals, we'll take them back to TAB, but I think this covers it, and so we'll move forward with this as our work plan for 2024. Any questions on that piece? Great. Moving on. The Transportation Mobility Plan update is in full swing. In front of your computers, right, your desks tonight at the dais, is some little business cards that we passed out. You can hand those to constituents or friends or family or neighbors, whoever you'd like, and they should be able to scan that code, that QR code, and get to our survey. And so we're very excited about people taking that survey and getting up to date with the TMP and kind of getting involved with, there's some sign-up efforts there too. So if you could hand those out, or if you certainly take the survey yourself, but make sure you do that. And then if you can hand those out, that would be wonderful. If you need more cards, I've got plenty on my desk. So thanks for that. And then technically on your work plan for tonight, we had a first and main update. Because we're having a whole presentation from RTD tonight on the peak service study for the Northwest Rail, we thought that just give you a quick update for First and Main, so you're on, kind of had that in the back of your mind as you're hearing about this peak service study and the Northwest Rail piece as well. So Tony Chacon, our redevelopment manager, tells us that land acquisition needed for the bus station is complete, and the parking garage. There's 2 parcels for construction of Kaufman Street in final negotiation, and so he's hoping to have those done by mid-2024. The city has completed an environmental assessment on all but one of the properties it has acquired and is in the process of obtaining one last phase 1 report. That's an environmental report by the end of this quarter. The city is under contract with a company called OTEC, a design consultant, to prepare construction plans for Kaufman Street construction, including installation of new underground utilities. Survey work is to commence in late January, early February. Tebow Properties, which owns most of those properties over there in that First and Main area, has agreed to work in partnership with the city relative to designing and constructing the bus station and the parking garage as part of a 400 approximate residential unit mixed-use project. So there'll be some mixed use in that location as well, so we're working with Tebow on that. There's about 40,000 square feet of commercial at ground level too that is going to be part of that project, so it should be very transit intensive. So we're hoping that our RTD friends are listening to that, and they are. Let's see. Tebow intends on having a design team on board by February 1st, so that's already happened. I'm hoping they're here. City is in negotiations with Tebow relative to formalizing a redevelopment and reimbursement agreement. It's anticipated this agreement will be executed by year end of this year. And the city is preparing amendments to the Southeast Longmont Urban Renewal Area Plan and expects to enter into tax increment negotiations with the schools, the county, special districts by the end of the first quarter 2024. That's so we can have that increment of tax financing to be able to fund a lot of this program. So some interesting stuff, some fun stuff going on. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me directly and I'll send it on to Tony. So with that, that ends the report of communications from staff, unless there's other staff members who have anything to add. Seeing none? Great, we're ready for the next item on your agenda, Chair.
I wanted to ask, is there any questions for Phil on any of those updates? No? Okay, just want to make sure. We'll go ahead and move to public comments. We've got one here on the list, Ross Sterrett.
I assume you guys need name, address, like City Council. Ross Sterrett, 2161 Steel Street. You guys got the timer ready, or just going to go for it? Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about my experience moving around Longmont, trying to avoid using a car as much as possible. So I live around 21st and Hover, so I use 326 as my local bus. It's also important to know that I work in Boulder. So 326 is my local bus. The last bus out of Nathan Kaufman leaves at 7:02 p.m. I asked before the meeting here, before most of y'all showed up, and I hear these usually run till about 8 o'clock. So my plan to get home is to maybe catch Bolt or 324, maybe probably Bolt, take that up to 22nd or so, and then walk a mile and a half home. So that's something that is kind of a barrier to getting here. Coming home from work, Bolt has been really bad about making the schedule by over 10 minutes usually, so I don't make my transfer, and then I stand outside in the cold for half an hour. And that's not very fun either. Yeah, but in the summer I take the bike instead of the bus because there's that walker at 8th and Kaufman that's really nice, and I don't have to wait for a transfer for my bicycle, and I can just get on that whenever I want. Also, like, it would be really nice to be able to, go to dinner downtown and take the bus home, so, everyone can have a drink if they want. We don't have to worry about driving. Parking is, no one likes to park. Yeah, that's sort of the short of it. I'd like to see, some... Oh yeah, it takes an hour and a half to get to work in the morning, because the bus takes a while. And then with the almost consistent missing of the transfer from Bolts to 326 local, it's like 2 hours to get home. So it's like, oh, let's leave the office at 5. Oh, hey, it's 7 o'clock and I'm home. That's also, not great. So it's like, I know that like we need to move away from personal cars for emissions reasons, for safety reasons, for so many reasons. We need to like make it easier to get around. And that when the time alone is a huge barrier, it's gonna put a lot of people off. Or like when your options are, oh, it's 7:03, have fun walking. Also, like, if you've ever taken like the time to look around at like the sidewalks on Hover, you'll see that there's a lot of people walking and biking. It's pretty cool to see that many people moving around that like not in a car, but also like especially north of 17th, Hover is treated as 45 plus miles an hour. And it's not exactly, you cannot have a comfortable conversation with someone while walking to get some groceries for dinner. And there's not really any other ways to bypass Hover by foot, north-south, right? It's, like, there's a couple ways, but they all add significant time, so you can't, like, sprint over for, oh, I need, like, 2 or 3 ingredients to make whatever it is I'm having. You're gonna take over because it's faster. There's a lot of off-street paths that are kind of treated as like parks. There's the one along Oligarchy Ditch that's really nice. Things like that are super great, very nice for getting around when they go where you want them to go, but also like if they don't go where you want them to go, they're not helpful. That's sort of my perspective on getting around trying to not use a car. I guess the other thing is just like if I'm trying to see a friend outside of town, it's basically guaranteed 2 hours plus on the bus. I know that we're going to have that Northwest Rail update here in a minute. I am super excited about that project because I saw a time estimate of it about an hour from Longmont to Denver, so that's going to really cut down on my travel times if the scheduling works out for me.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we can move on to the next item, which would be our information items. Phil, do you want to start with the introductions on item 6?
Absolutely. Thank you very much for that time, Chair. So item 6A is your Northwest Rail Peak Service Study overview and update from the RTD staff. Tonight we have Patrick Stanley from RTD as well as Keith Hall, and they will be providing the update to you regarding the peak service study. This is an exciting project. They'll give you the idea of where we are in the timeline and all those different things, but I'll have them come up and let you know what's going on. So without further ado, here comes Patrick Stanley.
Good evening. Good evening, board members and council members. Appreciate the opportunity to talk with you tonight. Let me know, I'm not great with microphones. Sometimes I screw up. So if I'm yelling at you, let me know. But yeah, we thank you, Phil, for the invitation to speak with you tonight and give you an update on the Northwest Rail Peak Service Study. My name is Patrick Stanley. I'm the project manager for the project. Keith Hall is our deputy project manager. He's been with us for about 1.5 years now. Been a real asset to the team and as we move forward. So tonight I want to give you, first I'll start with a kind of a real quick history of what the peak service is, and then we'll get into kind of what we're doing with the BNSF, we'll also with the Front Range Passenger Rail District, how that coordination is going. Talk a little bit more about what our most recent public engagement efforts were and what the results were. That we had a couple open houses in November, early November, the 8th and the 9th. One of them was here, actually right out here in the hallway. And then we'll talk a little bit about the next steps and the schedule moving forward. And any questions you might have too. So the peak service study, just kind of a real quick update for folks that maybe aren't aware, is it's a feasibility study that we're doing that looks at a more limited service for the Northwest Rail, realizing that in 2010 we did the EE, the environmental evaluation, but we didn't necessarily have the funding to move forward with that full service at that point. So we've tried various things in the last couple decades now, unfortunately, to try to find a way that we might be able to bring a solution up to the Northwest area. So the peak service is our latest attempt at trying to find a solution that we think will work. We're essentially assessing, like I said, a peak service operation, which is 3 trains in the morning from Longmont into Denver, and then 3 trains from Denver back to Longmont in the evening. So it's definitely a little bit more limited in its range and its scope. We're also partnering with local jurisdictions to do 6 new stations along the corridor. And there's a map here in a second, I'll show those, but obviously the terminal station right here in Longmont. We're identifying some feasible locations for a maintenance facility. The fleet that we are looking at having for the Northwest Rail is going to be different than our typical commuter rail fleet that we currently have on the system right now. Currently we have an overhead catenary powered system. So those of you that have ridden the rail system that we have for the commuter rail, we know that we have wires overhead, charges a train, and they're fully electric. We have clearance issues on this corridor with some of the BNSF structures, so we're not looking at that particular technology, so that's one of the reasons why we'll have a different kind of fleet, is we have a little bit different operations. We're coordinating with the BNSF. This particular corridor, once you get past the existing Westminster Station, which is the terminus of the existing B line right now, that would operate on the BNSF tracks. This is unique to RTD. There's no other rail corridor that we have where we operate on the same tracks. We operate in the same corridor, but not actually on the tracks themselves. We're evaluating potential train technologies, like I mentioned just a second ago. We're not necessarily looking to determine the exact vehicle that we're going to use on this corridor, but we want to know what is available, what is realistic, and what is feasible for the corridor. So, I think since we started this study, diesel was kind of the front runner way back in 2010, but battery technology, hydrogen technology, hybrids, those technologies are emerging. So when this project actually does happen, those could be viable options potentially. So we're not ruling anything out really, except for the overhead catenary styled system. And then we're exploring partnership opportunities. That may be local partnership opportunities with, City of Longmont and all the jurisdictions in between. But one of the major ones that we want to really keep an eye on is the Front Range Passenger Rail District, which is looking at their Front Range regional rail that runs right now. They're looking at between Pueblo and Fort Collins, with eyes to expand potentially to New Mexico and up into Wyoming. Excuse me. So here's a map of the study area. The dashed line is the area that would be kind of the extended area. The solid green line is the existing B line, which opened up in 2016. And it terminates right now at the Westminster Station at 72nd. The 6 new stations moving north from there, moving from south up to north. downtown Westminster, which is near 88th, Broomfield 116th, Flatiron Station, downtown Louisville, Boulder Junction at Depot Square, and then the final terminus here in the city of Longmont. The extension is about 35 miles. The existing B line is about 7 miles. And we have 4 existing stations right now on the B line, which are all high-level boarding platforms. So that's one of the things I'll touch on just a little bit here when we start looking at accessibility and how we want to be as accommodating and equitable as we possibly can with the way we set this up. So we'll touch real quick on BNSF and Front Range Passenger Rail. So we have contracted with the BNSF to do a 30% set of plans and cost estimates. One of the things that we haven't really had a great feel for in a number of years now is what the actual cost is for the BNSF. So we chose to get them on board. We're essentially contracting them to do this design with Wilson and Company as their consultant, so that we can get a pretty good idea of what we think those railroad costs are going to be. And that's capital cost and operational cost. Right now, they have basically a kind of a 3-phase delivery. So we had the 10% set of plans from them back in September. Right now, we just got the 20% plans about a week and a half ago. And we'll go over those with the SAT meeting later this week. So we're currently reviewing those right now, looking at what infrastructure they're saying is needed for us to operate. One of the big things on the BNSF to note is that it's a single track right now, the BNSF, for the most part, single all the way between Westminster and here. So in order for us to operate our peak service in the morning window and the evening window, we actually have to have what we call passing sidings. So that allows them to pull out of the way, and that we can have the operational priority during that window, so we won't get stuck behind a freight train that's slow moving, cause us delays, etc. But in order to do that, we have to give them a place to pull over. So initially we started with 4 passing sidings. Through negotiations, we've kind of gotten them down to 3. I say this, 2 and 1 really long one. So it's basically 4, but one's kind of connected. So we're going through that. That's been a major push for us, as well as the station sidings. As I mentioned a second ago, we have, in order to do level boarding, we have to do a siding track at our platforms because they have a wider footprint, a wider train than we do. They have to have 8'6" clear from center line of the track to any obstructions. And our typical platform is 5'4" from the center line of track. So if we try to do our platforms at 5'4", freight trains are going to run into it basically, which is not ideal. So, so in order to do that, we have to kind of remove our trains from the mainline track. And that basically creates a station siding at every single one of our stations. So the next step is we have 30%, should be coming up in kind of mid-spring, and then a pre-30%, sorry, and then we'll have our 30% really kind of wrapping up towards middle of the summer, June-ish. And really right now our study depends a lot on what the BNSF says. We're establishing what we call a common set of facts. How much is it going to cost for us to build this? What is it going to cost to operate? What are the infrastructure improvements we have to do? What is our ridership numbers, travel time, all those kind of pieces of information. But obviously, knowing the cost for the railroad and what it's going to take for us to operate on there is a major component of that, and we won't have all that information wrapped up until kind of the middle of this year. We say cordial on here. It's pretty cordial for the sidings. That's been one of the major things that we've been working on, is kind of where are these passing sidings, and where are they? Are they in locations that we can avoid any kind of blockage of roadways, paths, trails, impacts to residents, etc. And I think we've come up with a pretty good solution now, but it's taken a little bit of time to work through that. I think right now we have one crossing of the siding tracks that's at grade. And the reason that's a big deal is you can imagine, right, if they pull over for that entire peak period of time, you could have a freight train sitting on those sidings for like 3 hours. And if that's blocking a roadway, that's a pretty significant issue. So, but we've gotten to a good place with them on that. And then right now, in addition to that, we're also looking at a layover station and midday storage in Westminster. So we have to, since we're doing early morning trips, we have to do something with our trains during the middle of the day. We looked at options where we staged those trains down by downtown Denver, but it kind of turned out that it made a little bit more sense to actually do the return trip back to Westminster and stage them there. I apologize if I'm getting too technical but some people like it, some people don't. So Northwest Rail and Front Range Passenger Rail. So it's important to understand that these are two different services. And I'll kind of reiterate, we're inner city. You know, really commuter rail is designed to be more towards a metropolitan center, typically, type arrangement, as opposed to a regional rail like Front Range Passenger Rail is looking at that connects between cities. So it's a little bit different operation. We're in a little bit different place as far as schedules go. But we do talk with them regularly with Front Range Passenger Rail. The Front Range Passenger Rail executive leadership sits on our study advisory team, our SAT. And our general manager, Ms. Johnson, sits on the board of the Front Range Passenger Rail District. So we're having some good interaction and good communication as to what's going on between the two groups. One thing I'll just kind of run through them here. There are some potential partnership opportunities that we see. We believe that the Front Range Passenger Rail District is on the same page as we are for these type of items. As you can imagine, there could be some potential to share fleets. If nothing else, maybe a fleet purchase where we can get more discounts, platforms and stations, operations and maintenance costs, track improvements, and safety and crossing upgrades, things like positive train control, quiet zones, that sort of thing. So real quick, I wanted to touch on the engagement that we had in November, early November. So we had Longmont was November 8th, the open house. We had about 30 attendees for that. Thanks, Phil, for setting that up for us. Appreciate it. Broomfield was the next night. We had about 100 attendees there. And I wouldn't say that it's because your community is not engaged. I think it's because you're just at one end versus kind of in the middle. So it was snowing that night too. I do remember. So we also had a self-guided online meeting, which is where we got a lot of our traffic. We had about 2,500 people that we say engaged. That means they actually went in there and started clicking around and exploring what we were talking about. We also had about 250 survey responses from the online meeting. And in the last, I'd say probably about 4 or 5 months, we've been having a lot of pop-up events. We actually had one here in Longmont. That was help me remember what that one was. Jazz?
I can't remember. We do have one planned.
Yeah, we got another. So sorry,
Yeah, it's coming up.
putting Phil on the spot. We had one here. We had, like Westy Fest, a whole bunch of different options. And those were great. Actually, we had a lot of people stop by and we could have a good kind of frank, open conversation with them and give them a lot of detail on what's going on. And we had, I had about 885 people come to all those pop-up events. And then the final summary feedback, we're still working on a few of those things. We are trying to break out the numbers specific to the communities on what people had to say about the specific stations, because we figured that'll be helpful for our jurisdictions to understand what people are looking for in that particular station. So still a work in progress on that one. So again, kind of this is a little bit of a repeat here. We had, again, 30 in Longmont, 800 in Broomfield. We had about 5 total comment cards from Longmont, 9 from Broomfield. We usually don't get a lot of comment cards specifically at the event, but usually they end up going home and doing it online. So a little bit about the total viewer, the new users, had about 2,300 new users. Total users is an IP address. So if you had multiple people in the family, it goes down as a total user instead of a new user. So that's why that looks a little funky there. 2,600 engaged sessions, almost 2,600. That's we talked about people that actually went in there and started reading stuff, moved through the slide presentation, and we had about 6,000 total views. So pretty good participation for the most part. We're pretty happy with it. Could always do more, but it was not too bad of an outcome. Had about 393 submissions to the surveys, 253 completed station surveys, a little over 30 siting option forms. So that was really kind of, what do you think of these different sightings? Because in our public meeting, we had different locations for those passing sightings shown. And we wanted to hear people's feedback of what they thought about those various sighting locations. And then had about 100 total online meeting comment forms. So the website obviously is still up and running right now. Anybody can go there now. We've gotten about 700 or 780 or so people kind of sign up and ask for more information. So we're getting some pretty good participation from folks. So usually what we do after we have one of those open houses, we all kind of sit around on a Teams meeting and say, okay, what do we think we heard? So this is kind of the design teams and the study teams kind of take on this, is that we're hearing a lot of excitement from folks, and it's positive excitement. We have a few folks that are upset, obviously, about the situation and the taxes and kind of how long it's taken for this to happen. But for the most part, a lot of people are pretty happy about seeing something kind of move forward. Pretty excited about the possibility of having a rail service in the Northwest area. Generally, what we're seeing that people have kind of a concern with tends to be specific to the peak service concept. So it's things like, it may not run in the right time of day for us. It's too limited. It's one way only in the mornings as opposed to bi-directional. It doesn't have weekend service, some things like that. So that's generally what we are hearing from folks in general. But there is definitely, we've had some really good discussions with a lot of people, and kind of makes me excited about possibly having a solution that works for folks. So from the community, that was our thought. So we take a look at, okay, what did the community tell us? And it's pretty similar. Kind of just overall statements about the study in general, being kind of relatively positive about it. We have heard from a number of people that said, hey, peak service may not work for me today, but I still support it as a community member because I do think it's going to be a worthwhile service that hopefully will build out and become a little bit more useful for me in a future time. But I think it's good for the community in general. Station areas, generally what we hear, there's a couple station areas that people have talked about that I say they're fairly consistent that come up as a Gun Barrel and Niwot location for stations. But outside of that, we didn't really necessarily hear a whole lot about station locations. And then one real curiosity a lot of people have is integrated service options, right? How does this tie into the rest of the service, whether or not that's RTD provided or city provided or county provided or whatever that happens to be. And, will it remove any of the service that I currently have? So that's always a question as well. Land use questions come up, density, TOD. How are we looking for, what is the city? What's happening with the just land use in general around the area? Will I be pushed out potentially out of this area when a lot of development comes up? That's one we hear quite a bit. And then of course we got construction, which is a little ways off, but obviously if we move into that phase, that'll be things we'll have to mitigate as well, the construction impacts. So I'll just break this down. I'll go through it relatively quickly here. But we did ask people, these are the survey results. So just by quantity alone, you can see here, what do they see the benefits of the peak rail service plan? They were able to pick 3 of these, but this one's, I apologize, I should have brought my glasses here. Basically, this is reliability is a big one. Be able to get to their destination without worrying about traffic impacts, weather impacts, etc. Maybe I can read it on here a little better. Yeah, there you go. Man, you can see them good. Reduce carbon footprint. Yeah. So, not super surprising. I don't think from what we'd expect. I mean, I was a little surprised that the carbon footprint was kind of the highest one, but as opposed to convenience and whatnot. But you can kind of get an idea of what people are thinking in general, what their most important wishes are. So what do you believe is your greatest barrier to accessing the station? This one's kind of interesting because, you know, a lot of them were missing sidewalks was number one. So how do we make our connections between our station facilities and the surrounding community? And I wish I should say that this is a conglomeration of all the stations through the corridor, so it's not necessarily specific to Longmont. Oh, did I hit more here? Sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. Wanted to ask a question about the peak service station barriers, because I noticed it wasn't really listed here, and our public comment kind of touched on that. Last mile, first mile, micro-mobility, that sort of a thing. And I know we've talked about in Longmont having that on-demand service, but I noticed that wasn't really included as one of the barriers, and I would think, I'm thinking that would be a barrier for me.
I was thinking it was on here. Oh, maybe it's not. My budget. We do have I know we have another one on here, on one of the slides that does talk about that a little bit. But that is a good question. I know we did talk about that, which is kind of what. Well, let me flip through real quick and see where the other ones are. It's a good question, though. So how can peak service better be enhanced to meet your needs or expectations? Offer more. Yeah, weekend service is a big one. Kind of reverse commute is a big one. Midday, a little bit less. So, you know, these are kind of the what we are looking for. I think was what we call our milestone 4 part of the process, which is okay. We've heard feedback from the team here. Milestone 3 is basically the basic configuration, the basic configuration. So it's kind of what is peak service. Specifically what we asked to look at for peak service, the 3 trips in, the 3 trips out, the infrastructure as we have it identified. Milestone 3 really wraps that piece up. Milestone 4 is kind of taking a look at, okay, what might be some things that would enhance or make the service better that works for folks. So it's not necessarily something that we're looking at specifically to identify every single thing and put prices together. But I think it's important for us to listen to folks and realize that if we were to expand, what are those next incremental expansions? What makes sense? What do people want to see? And that's where we get into the milestone 4 pieces, as well as what's happening with the Front Range passenger rail. So here's what concerns you most about peak rail service. This might be man, I apologize. I don't have my glasses on. You guys mind if I grab my glasses real quick? Okay. Sorry.
Also, just to fill in the blank here, they did come to Rhythm at Roosevelt. So there was a pop-up event there. Pop-up, they booked it long in advance, but pop-up, I guess it's called pop-up. And also the Sustainable Transportation Summit, they were there in August, so a couple of times that they came to Longmont and spoke to folks. So.
All right, thanks, Phil. Sorry, I apologize. One side effect of getting older, I guess. So service only serves direction in the morning and the evening. So that's that single directional issue. The limited hours of operation. You know, just peak service in the morning, one direction, evening, one direction. Lack of weekend or evening service. And then here's the one I was thinking of, Mr. Lehner. Hopefully I said that right. Whether I can connect to transit. Services or destinations. So, you know, it is first and last mile is always a concern for RTD. It's something that we've tried multiple different programs, and it's, you know, we'll keep plugging away at it. It's important. On this particular corridor, we've talked a lot about flex ride services to maybe help bridge some of those pieces as well. So what is the most important element to include at or adjacent to future stations? So this is a question that we asked that we thought would kind of help us, but it would also help the stakeholders as well, our jurisdictional partners, kind of understand what people are looking for around a station, because we don't do land use. You know, we're the T part here. So obviously the biggest one we heard here is, you know, that people are looking for commercial and retail space, places to shop, grab something to eat, housing within biking or walking distance to the station. That was a big one, which is not super surprising as well. And then the kind of the next few to kind of round out, we got secure places for commuters to store their bikes, safe and secure places to commute and park, and enhanced bicycle and pedestrian connections to the station. So I was a little bit surprised that essential services was only one selection, but that's why we ask people.
And you'll recall from our earlier update on First and Main that the housing's coming in even more than South Main Station, excuse me, and then the 40,000 square feet of commercial space. So we're trying to address a lot of these issues with the land use piece on our side, understanding that they will bring the T, we'll have the LU. So.
Yep. All right, so real quick, we'll go through kind of the project schedule. So we are looking at wrapping up towards early summer, middle of the year here. It's going to depend a little bit on what the information we get from BNSF. There can be a little bit tricky sometimes to negotiate with and work with. So everything's kind of looking on track for that time frame. So moving forward, next steps, we're going to continue our BNSF coordination. We've got several stations that we still need to kind of work through some of the track locations and how the platform configuration works, including Longmont here. I was talking to Phil earlier about needing to have a front range passenger rail RTD Longmont discussion about what that potential station area looks like. We've got other technical activities, the draft of the base configuration report, which is that milestone 3 I was mentioning earlier, which is this is what it will take to do peak service as we have it defined. The draft of the common set of facts, how much is it going to cost, what infrastructure is needed, etc. And then we will continue to do community-based organization outreach through this winter and into early spring. We are trying to target some more cultural events where people might not be comfortable coming to some of the larger events. We're trying to go out to them and see, talk with some people that maybe are traditionally more underrepresented. And then spring 24, coming up here, we got milestones 4 and 5. Public engagement, we don't know exactly what that's going to look like just yet, but at the end of the study, we'll have another public engagement session. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions anybody has.
I've just got one, and I'm sure other board members would like to ask questions. It has to do with to me, no-brainers weekend service. I mean, a lot of folks would like to go down to Denver, as you probably know, cultural events, that sort of a thing. Mm-hmm. Is there a thought that possibly on a weekend service you could charge more? They're not commuting. It's more of a, whatever you want to call it, part of the trip to go downtown sort of thing. Folks might do that once a month or even less. Yeah. So my thought is a weekend service is kind of a no-brainer in regards to an offering, and maybe it is something that's premium as opposed to the daily commuter that's going to be going, peak service. But I'll let others ask questions.
Well, just real quick on that, we haven't thought about it quite in that same way, about charging premium for that. As you all are probably aware too, right now, the fare, people have asked about the fare. It is the same as what it is. Coming all the way here from Longmont into Denver is the same fare as it is to go from 3 blocks in Denver. So I can't remember what the final number was. I want to say it's $1.75. I don't know if you remember, Phil, or not, but we just did our, so we just did our fare zone simplification and price reduction. So we do feel it's pretty competitive to come all the way from Longmont into Denver right now. That is an interesting idea, though, and we can certainly kind of bat that around. One of the issues with weekend service now is anything beyond peak service is a potential BNSF issue that we need to work through. I would look at it saying it seems to me that it would be pretty reasonable to do a weekend service under the same provisions that we do Monday through Friday with the BNSF. We have not broached it specifically with them. It's possible that they may say this is when we want to move all of our trains around. And maybe, they may say that those windows are not available. So But interesting idea. Appreciate that.
Thank you for the presentation. Very helpful. Is the BNSF planning to adjust their train schedules as a part of this effort?
Probably to some extent. I don't know how much. The BNSF is, I gotta remember they're a private company. So they're a little bit guarded about what their schedule and what their operational needs are. What I can tell you is that they are planning on not running their trains during our peak period windows. Either get them out of the way or not run them into the corridor. So from our perspective, that's what we're looking for, is to make sure that we have a good operational window where we don't have interference from the freight tracks. So beyond that, I don't really know if there's anything else that they're talking about doing. There might be some things that they're talking about doing as it relates to Front Range Passenger Rail District, though.
Right.
So
So if their trains are not running during the northwest peak hour times, would they potentially be in those lay-by areas?
that is a potential, yes.
Okay.
And what I like to say is that, I think when we did a measurement, I think our consultant did a test at one of the crossings. I don't remember which one it was now, but I think they figured it was about 4.8 trains a day is what they counted from the BNSF currently right now. So don't hold me to that, though. It's and it's going to vary a little bit with the BNSF, and they're going to say they reserve the right to do much more than that. But what I would say is, do I anticipate that there's going to be a train in every single siding during every single peak period window? No, I would not. Is it possible? Yes. And the BNSF will always tell you that they're going to be able to reserve the right to use those sidings whenever they need to.
And how long is the longest train that they run through our area?
I want to say the latest that I heard of was like 1.4 miles, I think. The sidings that they've required for us are 9,000 feet long. So essentially gets you not quite a 2-mile train.
Will there be sidings on each direction, each side of the track, in case they had trains going in different directions that had to be diverted to a siding during these peak periods?
Right now it's not. It's single-sided. Their sidings are just on one side, so it'll be an operational scheduling thing for them when they're doing the dispatch to make sure that they, get them into the right locations. Like I said, there's not a huge amount of freight traffic on the corridor at the moment, so we can't really necessarily say what it's going to be in the future. If you were to ask me 15 years ago when the coal trains were running like crazy, it'd be like, oh man, they really use this corridor, a lot. But since that coal has kind of dried up, it's been a lot less. So I don't know exactly what the future holds. They'll only project out till about 2030 is what they're telling us, as far as kind of a commitment to us on, the basic operations that we're doing here. So our agreement would be a long-term agreement with them. We wouldn't do just a 7-year agreement. We'd probably do it for 99 years or something like that. But yeah, I wish I could tell you more about what the BNSF operations are, but they're pretty guarded about that, and I don't have a very clear window into everything that they're thinking.
Would this project involve improving any BNSF facilities that wouldn't specifically be used for passenger rail?
I hope not. No, that's one of the things we're doing when we go through the review. We're looking at the plan saying, okay, is any of this not caused by us? It gets a little interesting on some of the track geometry because, they may be doing something that you look at first and go, we don't even have, that's just existing track. We're not doing anything there. But part of the thing that we've asked them to do is do what we call curve smoothing. So basically, it's taking kind of tight turns or different track geometry and smoothing it out so we can increase our travel speeds. So we want to be able to operate up to 79 miles an hour on the corridor. We're not going to hit that in all places, but we will be able to hit it in some places. And, what we've asked them to do is to hit, our travel time studies that we've done show a little bit over an hour, as this gentleman said a second ago, about 65 minutes or so, plus or minus a few minutes. And we've asked them to, when they're looking at their engineering, this is our goal, this is our target. So, so they may be doing some things, we need to dig into this with them, that we look at and go, I don't know if that's a speed thing, or is that a track condition thing right now, or maybe it's a substandard set piece of track for running our passenger trains on that has to be updated, or are they doing it maybe for themselves? We don't know that answer yet, so that's part of our review comments that we got to go back through with them.
Okay, just a couple more questions for me as points of information. When did the Fast Tracks sales tax begin to be collected in Boulder County?
2005, January 1st, 2005. We voted in 2004 for the sales tax in November, and so the sales tax came online in 2005.
Right.
And approximately how much revenue has been collected to date from Boulder County?
That I don't know the answer to. Phil might. I don't have the answer to that one, unfortunately. Off the top of my head, I
Longmont
apologize.
data. If you want just Longmont, I can't give you Boulder County.
Oh, right. Well, how about Longmont?
Yeah. Could hum it, but you don't want to hear that. We can look into that information and get back to you on that for the Boulder County in general.
Okay, thanks very much.
But I don't know if Phil, you can chime in here when you have it. Okay.
So for just fast tracks since 2005, as of the end of year 2022, we don't have the 2023 numbers yet. It was almost $83 million. And 17 million is going to come back to the First and Main Station area, leaving a balance of 65,892,000 and change.
Sorry, a lot to write down there.
Sure.
I think I'll start out with kind of why a peak study or peak service study. Is it kind of BNSF related, or what's?
No, so the little bit of history. So we did the EE in 2010. We actually followed that up with the NAMS, which was 2013, 2014. That was a different approach to looking at how we could build out the full alignment, the full service by segment. So it'd basically be full double tracking of the entire corridor, but we do it by, say Westminster to Louisville, kind of build it out that way. The peak service concept really actually came out of kind of our stakeholders as a concept to explore. And again, it was an idea of can we get a kind of a starter service, a foot in the door type service, get on the corridor, get agreement with BNSF, and then as ridership demand grows and everything, we could start to build it out to a more full day, full service scenario in increments. So it's kind of, instead of doing it by phases of full, it's more of a phase of limited service up to a full service. If that makes sense. So the idea being that hopefully it's less expensive. We're not paying for all the full infrastructure improvements. And again, it helps us get moving on it so that we can expand it later.
Okay, so expansion might not be limited from BNSF in the future.
Might not be. I mean,
Okay,
anything
yeah.
outside of peak service, well, we don't have it. I mean, we're going to have a conceptual deal with the BNSF. Until we have kind of a board-approved project to move forward on, we're not going to go into an agreement with the BNSF for a finalized version, executed agreement.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think, we're going to operate on their corridor, and if we have a partnership with Front Range Passenger Rail and look at a joint operations of some kind, that's a different scenario as well. So right now, we've contracted the BNSF to look specifically at peak service. So kind of anything outside of that is subject to negotiation. But I wouldn't say it's necessarily a deal breaker. Kind of depends a little bit on what kind of infrastructure we're willing to put in. So if we go back to full double tracking, I'm sure they'd be fine, as an example. So this won't limit kind of those future expansions, but there may have to be some BNSF discussions along the way.
Okay, and then peak service, like what kind of people are we expecting to use this during,
That's a really good question. And one of the reasons I say it's a really good question is obviously since the pandemic, we've got a different environment.
Work culture has changed.
Yeah, we've got quite a bit of a different environment. And I don't know that we have the crystal ball just yet as to how it's all going to completely shake out as far as the ridership, the work scenario, the commuting scenario. Obviously, when we envisioned it, it was envisioned really as more of a commuter type scenario with Denver as the base. So right now, the riderships are really more towards the work commuter, I would say. But from Longmont, what's interesting, I think, is that what we've heard from a lot of folks at our pop-up events, and in particular, is that a lot of the Longmont folks aren't going to Denver. They're going to Boulder or Westminster or Brentwood. They're not necessarily going all the way in. So, just something to think of there. But it is really geared towards a work commute type scenario.
Well, I just bring that up because, there's all types of workers, and sometimes the people that would benefit the most from reduced costs of car ownership are usually outside those peak windows.
Sure.
And even people who are working on the weekend, et cetera. So I just hope we're always thinking about other people with
Right.
less means.
And I agree. One of the things that we have heard fairly consistently, and I didn't touch on it earlier, and I apologize, was kind of your non-traditional work periods. Hospitality, as an example, is a big one. Retail, some other things that don't have necessarily an 8 to 5 kind of job, and that's why when we look at Milestone 4 and how would we expand this, I think that's pretty high up on the list of how can we do some return service, go in the other direction. How can we maybe adjust it a little bit larger window potentially? What are those next steps that we could potentially look at?
Okay. And then final question is Northwest Rail, so like this is RTD focused, and then how does it relate to FRPR? And specifically, I bring that up because I think FRPR is going to request a tax. And so I'm just wondering how to talk to the Longmont citizens about a potential vote that might be coming up.
Yeah, that's interesting. So right now we're looking at our project kind of more or less focused on what we're doing here. That's what the board asked us to do, is look at peak service. I think Front Range Rail, Passenger Rail is in a little bit of a similar situation, trying to figure out what their service development plan looks like. What I can tell you is that we talk with them pretty regularly, and I think we all see, a pretty good opportunity to do maybe some sort of joint operations. I don't know exactly what that looks like. That ultimately is going to be up to the board of RTD and the board of Front Range Passenger Rail to make a determination on what that looks like. From the tax standpoint, I don't know exactly what to tell you there. Obviously, they're going to ask for that, and theirs is a much bigger rail corridor than just Longmont, or even Boulder County, or from Denver up north. So they're looking at it to do their entire corridor. So I do think there's some pretty significant opportunities out there with RTD and Front Range Passenger Rail to work together to try to find a solution that is mutually beneficial, where we can split costs between the two groups and try to be more efficient about it. One thing that's nice about Front Range Passenger Rail for us is that Our competitiveness for federal funding is limited. We just, we're not necessarily positioned very well for getting federal funding. Front Range Passenger Rail is more positioned for that, so we think working with them could also open some doors that are closed to us right now, as far as bringing service up to the Northwest area.
Just one point to that as well. We're planning on having Front Range Passenger Rail come present in May for you all, so we should hear more about some of those specifics from them then. Thanks.
Yeah, we're working pretty hard to not preclude each other on what we're trying to do, which is an interesting proposition when we don't know exactly 100% we have a pretty good idea what we're trying to do with the peak service. They're still studying on their side as to exactly what, when the frequency is, what they're actually going to want to put in for their kind of initial service. So that's why we want to keep in touch with them. And as that information comes over, we're trying to use that as best we can to make sure that we're not locking one of the other parties out of potentially being on the corridor.
Yeah, it makes sense. I just,
Yeah.
It has been 20 years, and our population has at least grown. So
Sure.
there'll be some new heads, new ideas, but just trying to figure out how to communicate that
Sure.
to the public.
Understand.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes, thank you for your time. And I'm just curious as to what spurred on this design from happening now, and why didn't it happen sooner for the BNSF Wilson and Company contract design?
Well, I think the first thing is the board, basically, there was a board action to go ahead and do the study. And so we had funding at that point to actually contract with BNSF. So it's it's a continuation of trying to find out some sort of solution up here to the Northwest area. So I think the board resolution was in 2021, I believe, for RTD to do the peak service study. The 3 years before that, we weren't doing a whole lot of studies really through the pandemic part. And I think the concept for peak service came up in 2017, 2018, something like that, if I remember correctly. So.
And what actions is the board currently doing to restore regional transportation where it was pre-pandemic and expand it beyond to satisfy the needs of our current people that need transportation now?
Sure. So I'm trying to remember the dates, and I apologize here. It was probably 6 or 7 months ago. The board adopted the system optimization plan, which does kind of talk more towards trying to restore and establish some additional routes and additional service in a few areas. It doesn't necessarily go back to 100% of what it was pre-pandemic. I do not know the full ins and outs of the system optimization plan, but the idea is by 2027, I believe, that they're supposed to try to restore resources. If we have the resources, and primarily that's operators, I think is our biggest challenge with resources. That kind of outlines what we will be looking to bring back, ideally, between now and 2027. Some of it I know some of the Flatiron Flyers, as an example, are being restored. I think there's some additional service on the LD, but I'm not positive. So that's a good plan to look at. It's on the RTD webpage as well, and we can get links for everybody if they want to check that out. But that's really kind of what we're looking at as an agency, about how we want to bring back some of the service that was canceled, look at some additional routes, maybe they're there, and might look at some routes that are not effective as well. So it's kind of our mid-range, or kind of short to mid-range plan of where we're going as far as service.
And my last question is, I've recently seen that that Colorado legislators are looking to plan to restructure RTD's board, and I was wondering if you have any comments on their ideas.
Can I go with no comment on that one?
That is understandable. Thank you.
Sure.
Just quick point. We typically do all of RTD in one fell swoop, and so we do fast tracks and the planning group. And this time we've broken it into the peak service study for this month, And then in April, RTD planning staff will come back and they'll have a lot of those answers to those questions about reinstituting service that was lost, and might even have some thoughts on the restructuring, but we'll see.
Yeah, that one might be a tough one to get a comment out of staff on. Well, for one thing, I don't really know some of the details, to be honest with you, at this stage. And so,
Thanks for the presentation.
sure.
So just a couple of questions. What's kind of the timescale of getting this project actually in fruition?
That's a great question, and unfortunately, what I have to tell you is probably not the news that people want to necessarily hear, which is this is a feasibility study for us to understand what it's going to cost, so that we can make an informed decision about how we move forward. So we don't necessarily have a timeline for that. It's going to depend probably on a few factors. You know, is there a potential partnership with Front Range Passenger Rail, and if so, what does that look like, funding standpoint? Are we on our own? And then, then we have to take a look really hard at what our internal RTD financial outcome looks like, and how we might, finance something like this. So I don't have an exact answer for you, and I don't really even have much of a range. We'll take it to the board, later this summer, and see where we want to go from there. Sorry, I wish I did. I wish I had an answer for you. I really do.
I understand. It's just, people have been waiting
Sure.
for almost 20 years now. So.
Yeah, I understand.
You mentioned the time you're anticipating it's going to take to get down to Denver. What would be the time that it would take to get to Boulder from here?
Oh gosh, I wish I could remember that exactly. It's not much because that's a pretty straight shot. There's no stations in between. I want to say it's like 12 to 15 minutes, something in that range.
Well, that is a lot faster than the bus.
Yeah, it's not like I said. There's not a lot. There's really not much in between. So it's a pretty quick shot.
And that's to Eastern Boulder. So the depot that's over there on 30th and Pearl.
Yeah, and then presumably you'd have transfers to other routes in Boulder.
Right. Don't hold me to that, but I can get you probably a little bit better figure if you want us to.
That sounds massively faster than the bus right now.
Okay.
I'm presuming that it wouldn't be affected by like snow, for example. It would be run all year. Like if we had a heavy snowstorm, would that affect the trains?
Typically, trains can deal with the snow much better than the roadways can. So, of all the snow events that we've had since we opened up the A line, I can't really think of any that due to snow itself was necessarily an issue. I think if anything, you usually might get something about snow accumulating on the lines or something of that nature. But typically we can operate with the snow much more reliably than the roadways. We're not as weather dependent for the train. So, in fact, I was talking to one of the old rail operations guys a couple of years ago, and he said, the thing is, you run the trains, that's how you get rid of the snow. You run the trains, and it clears it off as you go. So, yeah, you get one of those crazy snow plows like they have at the train
so
museum.
like is you going to put a plow on the front of it? I know you're still figuring out like what type of trains you would have and kind of what they would look like, but would you have accommodations for like having bikes on the train so that especially the first and last mile would be accommodated?
I can almost certainly say we would have bike accommodations. Yes, I mean our commuter rail fleet we have right now have I want to say it's 2 racks per car, or maybe it's 4 racks. I think it's 4 racks per car currently right now, and I don't see any reason for us to not have bike racks on there. I think that would be egregious of us not to put bike racks on the train,
And
especially if we're talking about first and last mile connectivity.
Yeah. Would that also accommodate cargo bikes that have 3 wheels? Since I'm a cargo bike rider myself.
That's a good question. I don't know. We can look into that one when we get to that time.
Yeah, because that's my main problem for me getting from place to place is that
Okay.
I can't take it on a bus.
Well, I know what we did on the commuter rail. Just FYI, is we had several public demonstrations of the mock-up. I don't know if anybody ever saw that for the RTD commuter rail back in 2014 or so. and where we could have public come in and give us comments on a lot of different things, seating arrangements, some of the finishes on the trains, the bike racks and luggage racks and all that sort of thing. So if we do, if it does move forward and our board says, yeah, let's go on this thing, I think that would be part of the process is to have some feedback on the actual rail cars themselves. High floor. Yeah. Yeah, it would be. We are pretty cognizant. We do want it to be high floor, and part of there's some reasons for that. Thanks, Phil. So we have 4 existing high-level platforms right now. So in order if you're going to do a low level, those don't work anymore. You would have to extend platforms or reconfigure those platforms. But it's also the highest level of ADA accessibility that we can get is to do a full level boarding. So that's something that's important to the agency. So that does help. That part alone helps quite a bit with the bikes. So then it's just a matter of can we find some space.
My other question was, it was to do with the funding. So would you use some of the fast track funds potentially for funding this route?
Yes, I'm not the chief financial officer of RTD, but that's what the fast tracks funds are for. Is for the fast tracks corridors. So this is the one that I think probably has the most desire to get built out sooner rather than later. So I would say that's absolutely. Now the FISA fund right now is not enough. So the question is, how do we look at it from a long-term financial standpoint to see how we would potentially finance this? Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Fast tracks. Is it internal? Fast tracks internal savings account. Yep. It's our fast track savings account, basically.
Okay. Obviously, you're just looking at this one particular route right now, but I mean, the 287 corridor would be another potential route. Obviously, there's not a BNSF line down that way. Is that a potential at some point?
I thought, for some reason, I could be wrong on this. I thought 287 was maybe something that had been considered for a BRT, right?
Yeah, 287 is still being looked at as the BRT service. We did look at
Right.
extending the North Metro corridor that goes through Thornton, and the line actually extends into Erie. Could you then take it through Erie up 287, and it didn't have the ridership that the other line has. Didn't have the connection to Boulder, I think, is the key on that one.
Right. And that was actually something that was looked at during the NAMS, the Northwest Area Mobility Study. So,
Okay, thank you.
good question, though.
Hi.
Hi.
I just have one question.
Sure.
When is the next public outreach?
I don't know the exact date yet, but it'll be towards kind of the end of this study because it's really kind of a wrap-up. So when we have the kind of the base configuration information, the common set of facts, kind of all nailed down, which is dependent really upon the BNSF schedule right now. So I'd say it's going to be really probably closer to June-ish. But Phil sits in on our SAT, so we should be able to get updates out to all of you on when that's happening.
All right. Cool. Thank you.
Sure.
I've just got one last question. I'm just curious, in regards to BNSF, are they incentivized other than having an agreement with RTD and or FRPR? Is there any way to create some sort of funding mechanism that they even get more incentivized so there's more cooperation?
Well, we were currently paying them actually for this 30% plan, so that's how we kind of got them on board for that. There will be, what I would say is there's going to be an annual, probably operational agreement in here. And I think it's really a way for them, I think, to take a corridor that they have that's maybe underutilized a little bit and leverage an asset that they currently have to make some revenue. So I think, I think especially when it comes to a potential joint operations between FRPR and RTD, I think there's probably definitely some interest from BNSF in there. might be trying to unlock federal funds to do track improvements or whatever that happens to be, their motivation. But there's a few different things I think that would motivate them on that. Because looking at now and probably the foreseeable future, we don't necessarily see, now we don't have the inside view of what they're looking at, but it's kind of hard to imagine that they're going to be doing significantly more freight operations on the corridor. So, but yeah, I think there's definitely some incentive for them.
Then I have one more question actually for the city. So Patrick, you're off the hook. In terms of the First and Main Transit Center, because I heard mixed use, housing, commercial space, lots of parking. Is there going to be any more? Because, I was real excited from the retreat this past weekend. Council was really talking about placemaking. And so that's part of that, but then also public amenities. Any talk of park or gathering spaces?
Yeah, I'm
such
sorry.
as,
Sorry. Oh, excuse me. Go ahead.
Well, because I just think of transit centers around the world, and it's always a big town square, essentially. So, a place to be.
Yeah, I'll try to pull up maybe some visuals of what we have going as far as the First and Main update, and maybe it's for next time. We'll see what kind of time we have at the end, but I'll send them out either way. I'd like to show you that there is a plaza planned for that First and Main. It's right behind the platform, basically. So, platform right along First Avenue there, just west of Kaufman. So the platform would actually take over First Avenue. So First Avenue would go away and become the platform area, and then the plaza would be just south and east of that, and would connect you to the parking and to the bus terminal that's planned, and that's actually got some funding for it. So we plan on having that. But you're right, placemaking is a key to that.
Yeah, thank you.
Another question for you. What can we do as like TAB and citizens of Longmont to help make this project happen? Like, is there things that we can do to facilitate, to encourage the process to go forward? And I don't know. I'm just
Sure. Great question. And I might have to mull on that just a little bit on good ways to do it. But obviously, interaction with our board members up in this area is always useful. Let them know what you think, whether or not you want to do that as a group or individuals or how that works. I think on the NAMs, if I remember right, there was a support letter as an example from the Northwest Area Mayors and Commissioners group coalition, and I think that probably went a long way as well. It's kind of a it's basically a support paper on what the community wants to have up in the area. So our board members, obviously they're kind of beholden to the voters and the communities up in this area, so that it doesn't hurt for them to hear about that. That's off the top of my head. We'll think of some other ways, but.
One follow-up question. You mentioned FISA. So is all of the tax revenue that's been collected plus accumulated investment income, is that all still available for this project?
I'm not sure exactly how they break that out. I mean, obviously we've used a lot of the money for fast tracks on some of the fast tracks corridors, including US 36. So this is just kind of what we have currently that hasn't been used to date on any other corridors is what's in there right now.
I see.
Again, I'm not the CFO, so I'm not kind of reaching at that a little bit, but I believe that's the case.
Well, great. Thanks for the presentation. We really appreciate it.
That works. Absolutely. If you have any other questions too, we work with Phil a lot, so if you want to pass them on to Phil, we'll get back to you that way too. So appreciate it. Okay. Good.
Good evening, board members. Next on the agenda is a presentation for snow and ice or snow plowing. I think it's, when we talk about snow and ice in any of our operations plans, it's important to note that any event that we deploy for to deal with snow it's a disruption on a number of levels. It's a disruption to the transportation network, whether that's our roadway system, trails, greenways. It's a disruption to city services, as well as it's a disruption to both Public Works and Natural Resources, who are the operations wing, who attack storms to deal with them. They put both Public Works and Natural Resources put basically their regular workload aside to deal with these events. So I noted to start, and what I would ask you is the presentation that's in your packet, you can throw that away, because this is a lot different than what was put in the packet. That was actually a draft. Some of the information is the same, but there's a lot more on this presentation, and we can get you the electronic version afterwards. So there's two efforts going on in the city of Longmont for snow events. One is by Public Works, which is basically the major transportation network. And then there's our Natural Resources team, which is our Parks and Rec group, who handle basically access to city buildings, city parking lots, greenways and parks, and then some designated right-of-way areas. The core objectives, Public Works is we provide access for emergency vehicles. That's first and foremost. Maintain the safest possible flow of commuter traffic through the city during the storm. Emphasizing access for bus routes and schools. And then our goal is to restore normal mobility conditions as soon as possible after the event has ended. Natural Resources, they want to reduce impacts on greenways, parks, and designated arterial rights-of-way. That area of arterial rights-of-way is certain areas of sidewalk on rights-of-way that is not maintained by either an HOA or by an individual property owner. Enhance the quality of life for residents and visitors of Longmont. While we don't recommend it, people still, in a snowstorm, want to drive and get around. So even after an event, they still expect that they can move around with the same mobility they have on a dry road. So we do try to focus on some of the downtown areas to get that cleaned up, which is one of our core centers. And then we want to provide safe access to city facilities, schools, and the downtown area. So for Public Works and also Natural Resources, some of the deployment factors are very similar because each storm brings unique challenges. So snow and ice operations are optimized to target a fairly wide range of conditions. Every storm's different. We look at it, predicted weather conditions, air and ground temperatures, potential for consecutive storms occurring in a short period. In 2023, we saw several of those, where no sooner had we finished operations on one storm than another one came along. And then, some of our deployment is based on funding, manpower, and then equipment. And when I say that, prior to deployment, it isn't just Natural Resources or Public Works that are working to address issues with the storm. Our fleet department is getting trucks ready, making sure that they put us hopefully at the front of the list, so that we can get all of our equipment up and running for any breakdowns we've had from either the previous storm or from regular operations. And then our Emergency Operations Center usually gears up. Most of the events, they work electronically, providing information to city staff for how things are going, and also communications. That group is getting the message out, storms imminent, what the level of it is, and what we can expect. Some of our planning and deployment tools include local and long-range forecasts, radar maps, how large the storm is, what's the swath of the area to be covered. Daily and hourly temperatures will dictate how we're going to respond. Pavement and air temperatures is very important. A lot of what we do prior to storm is on most of our concrete roads is we try to get a brine down to help with the melting. That's one of the key components is letting nature do some of the work for us. Involves melting of conditions. If we can get, if it's not too cold on a road, we'll get the brine down. Hopefully that'll work to melt so we're not plowing as much. We have a number of live street cameras throughout the city. Help us monitor conditions and when storms start, when they end, and what we look for in between. And then basically some out of the weather forecasts and snowfall forecasts and measurements. So I'm going to start with a little bit of information on streets plowing, and then tail end I'll have some information about what Natural Resources does on trails. So we utilize the best practice techniques that's focused on safety and efficiency. We plow basically from inside out. Almost all of the roads in Longmont are crowned, so roads are designed to be plowed from the center out towards the edge of the road to promote that drainage. We plow in straight paths from the road center to the curb edge on arterials that are 3 lanes or more. And some of our collectors, we also have like a train where we plow in conjunction. One plow comes through, and then a second plow passes very shortly thereafter. We want to try to allow slower traffic to keep right. As we plow, consistent lanes cleared for emergency vehicles. That's the critical component. We want to keep emergency services working during an event. Our trucks do not back up or crisscross. We have our routes designed to keep them moving. Crisscrossing, as you cross that tends to create some of those windrows or snow rows that make it very difficult in the transportation at our intersections to move through them. Plowing from the center of the road out, snow does not pack, and it's easier to melt. It doesn't create ice. If we have a day event where we might have snow and then with some of our de-icing material, it'll melt. We don't want it to refreeze, so that helps a lot. And then as we move from inside out, the edge of the road is cleared on the final pass. It opens up the areas in front of bus stops. Some areas we cannot plow bike lanes. The full bike lane, we try to plow about half the bike lane. It just depends on what that road configuration is. If there's parked cars there, try not to plow parked cars in. So it's geared around melting acceleration. Darker pavement absorbs the sun, warmth better. Compacted snow takes longer to melt. Opening more pavement surfaces expedites the melting. It's about drainage promotion. Compacted snow at the edges blocks the runoff, so that's why we try to clear the road eventually. Keeping the center lane bare allows water to escape while plowing can continue. The inside-out method is engineered to enhance motorist visibility while protecting equipment. Our focus starts where most vehicles will travel, which is our arterials and then collectors. We ask pedestrians and bikes to steer clear of work trucks during this process, enabling our safe, systematic coverage. It's a responsible balance of access versus ideal clearing. Our limitations for that are equipment. Trucks and blades are designed for roads. We have a limited crew size and staff hours. When we gear up for a storm, we send about half of our team home early because we work about a 12-hour shift. In that 12 hours, we get about 4 passes throughout the city for the number of roads or miles of road we plow. And then budget constraints. In some cases, last year we did 11 events. Towards the end of the year, we were shifting money around left and right, trying to cover overtime, and also, purchasing salt and materials. We usually buy and put an order in sometime in June or July. We get a better price for that. We store it for several months before an event. Last year, we were stretching to try to shift money around. Why roads are prioritized? We want to ensure emergency access, police, fire, and ambulances. And those vital community lifelines. We want to maintain our transportation arteries and collectors to allow people to commute to jobs for critical goods and transport, as well as our bus routes. And then there's roads are prioritized. Some safety hazards, you're going to get buried objects. okay? Whether that's fire hydrants, one of the safety hazards is visibility, okay? And then park cars. We still have a number of arterials and in some areas are collectors that people still park. They were built as residential areas and people park, 17th is an example, where people park right along the roadway. And then it makes it a challenge to get the road completely plowed without plowing in vehicles. We recognize that there is a pedestrian and biker reliance on our system, and that staff does try to assist once that core work is completed. So we do prioritize key motorways to maintain access for most residents, and we always welcome feedback on improving some of our multimodal winter mobility. So I mentioned bus routes. This is the map on the right, kind of hard to read. If you overlay that or overlay the bus routes map onto the where we plow, the green is where we plow for arterials and collectors. Almost all of our bus routes are covered. So we do focus on getting that transportation network back up and running. So moving over to the deployment for natural resources. Okay, their guidelines include detection, decide or decision, deployment, and then access. So under detection, they monitor a storm. The managers, supervisors, and staff monitor weather services for any forecasts as it builds up. And depending on the level of event, natural resources staff are informed of the event and then directed to report to duty. Their deployment is the supervisor deploys the teams as necessary. They work through a series of zones, depending, in some cases in Longmont, we may have 1 inch on one side of town and 3 inches on the other. They may shift their deployment around to address that. And then, for access, they're continually there's a typo, continually accessing the needs of each zone, and then they adjust staff accordingly. So natural resources looks at 3 deployment types, actually, 3 deployment types. Their level 1 is little known accumulation. They may wait till after the event and then deploy staff during regular working hours. Their focus on those events is the treatment of city facilities downtown, and then areas are prone to ice accumulation. Level 2 is a minor to medium accumulation, and that accumulation can be both inches or the degree of snowfall, anywhere from 1 to 2.5 inches per hour. They may start to mobilize. That's a full deployment of all their employees, again with a focus on city facilities, school routes, and then downtown areas. The major storms, blizzards, and then emergency conditions with a significant accumulation. They'll have targeted operations in the downtown area, school routes, right-of-ways, and greenways. They will also then bring in private contractors as well for some of that work and get contractor assistance. And then their plowing priority on the emergencies is the continuation of emergency services. So their priorities, priority 1 is going to be their city facilities, fire stations, greenway paths with the primary school access routes. One of the priorities is the left-hand greenway from Hoover to Highway 119. That came up a couple of years ago, and they shifted their priorities around. That's a major transportation corridor for bikes, so they focus on that, and then as well as downtown sidewalks and parking lots. Once those are completed, they'll shift over to the priority 2 and deal with arterial rights-of-way, followed by priority 3, which is the greenways. The priority 4, then the sidewalks and parking lots at their neighborhood parks, neighborhood, community, and district parks. And then it's important to note, while natural resources does handle some sidewalk, as per municipal code, snow and ice on sidewalks is the responsibility of the property owner that is abutting that sidewalk. So, in closing, just some more information. Public Works plows about 146 miles in an event. There are 357 miles of streets and roads in Longmont. We plow 146 miles. We get about 4 circuits per shift. And depending on the event, it will depend on how many shifts we run. Usually on most standard storms, it's usually 2 to 3 shifts by the time we have most work done. And then we'll go back to our normal operation and we'll put crews on, cleaning some stuff up, dealing with some hot spots, putting down material in intersections, some areas, and then dealing with a lot of call-ins. In areas where people are, there may be some rows, that we may have missed, so we circle back around and hit those. So we're usually, after an event ends, we're usually 2 to 3, 4 days dealing with some of the conditions. Our operation is 24/7 until roads are clear. And then after that, we start dealing with road edges. City does not plow neighborhood streets, okay, unless directed to do so. So in the almost 6 years I've been here, I think we were called in once to deal with neighborhood streets. And that's Matt McKenzie. He's our manager of operations. He says twice since he's been here. I don't know how many years that is, but we'll go with that. So why not? Okay, so one of the factors is plowing 146 streets keeps our hands full. Going back to a disruption of operations, we put everything else aside to deal with snow plowing. And that includes not just our streets guys, but our water and sanitary sewer staff as well. They get involved. We also have some part-time employees we call in who like to plow. So we bring them on, we hire them up, bring them on board, and they come in and plow for us. It is a greater removal impact to residents when you plow for sidewalks and driveways. So when you plow, similar to plowing in a car, you're going to plow in, you're going to plow, people go out, they have 24 hours to clear the sidewalk, we go in and plow it. After an event, we're going to plow over sidewalk, we'll plow driveways in, we plow cars in. When we've gone into residential neighborhoods to plow, we get more complaints from doing that work than we do complaints about why aren't you doing it. And then the snow road blockages, which is plowing everything in. Estimated cost, if the city were to undertake all of that, would be probably about $5 million to start for equipment, hiring up manpower, and then on an average year, probably about $3 million a year in additional costs. Natural resources, they plow about 115 miles of trails and greenways. Their plowing includes, as well as for our roads, some placement of de-icing and traction material in some areas. They cover 11 city facilities for the parking lots and access points. They do Main Street sidewalks from 2nd to Longs Peak. Yeah, I know, they do. They also do off of Main, 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th areas to the alleys. Both east and west side, that they do the downtown parking lots and they cover the downtown breezeways. So in closing, should there be issues occurring, we miss a street, got some snow buildup, we also always offer up call Public Works, 303-651-8416. Or you can go through ServiceWorks, serviceworks.longmontcolorado.gov. You can also call the police non-emergency number, 303-651-8585. And then for emergencies, it's always 911. Other staff that work some of our events, I was just reminded when I saw the emergency number. We have our signal guys out during some snow events, cleaning signal heads. One of the quick solutions to some of the snow buildup is you'll see there are some cones on some of our heads facing north or south. We were able to pick up these, they were, someone recommended to us, and they're actually quite effective at reducing the snow buildup. Old style signal heads, where they produced heat, you never had that buildup. A lot of our signals are now LEDs. They don't put off as much heat, so the snow builds up on them. So we have staff go out to do that. And that is an update on snow, ice, and plowing. And Matt and I are here to answer any questions.
Longmont is revising the multimodal part of its comprehensive plan to become the transportation mobility plan. The goals section of the request for proposals for that TMP effort includes this statement, and I'm quoting here. The desire is that this update will result in a comprehensive, holistic reorganization of transportation priorities to flip the historic narrative of mode hierarchy. Pedestrian movement and safety at the top of the new priority list, and the movement of single occupancy, privately owned vehicles toward the lower priorities. That's the end of the quote. So, how do you envision snow and ice removal in Longmont evolving in response to that flipping of the mode hierarchy?
I don't know that I would visualize it changing much. One of our first priorities is to maintain the transportation system for emergency services and emergency vehicles. And that is one of the key goals of what we try to achieve. So Phil says also transit. That was one of our goals too. So, I'd have to ponder that. I think there are, when we talk about plowing roads, I'm not sure that you can achieve that to put pedestrians and bikes first with the existing road configurations. There may be an effort to be made in putting more focus on trails and our trail system. And as the TMP hopefully can envision the building out of that network and improving transportation and the use of our trail system, then that would be where I would more than likely see more effort or a higher priority of trail system being done as part of snow removal.
Can I just add, I think also TMP operates differently than, I think, snow removal. Number one, because we're talking about operational, I think, is critical here. And as you mentioned, with emergency vehicle services, that's probably going to take priority over anything else when it comes to, a plan or a policy that city has in place, if that makes sense. I see what you're getting at in terms of the pedestrian and flipping that paradigm. However, for an event driven like this, imagine if it were a hurricane or something like that as an emergency. I think emergency services and those critical services are what we're trying to preserve and maintain.
Okay, but would you agree that emergency services involve professional drivers and specialized vehicles? In other words, think of a fire truck and the fire department personnel who operate them.
Yeah.
They're not just your average drivers, they're trained professionals.
But they also need they'll also need the clearer surface, right, to make we have to meet response times in the city regardless of the weather conditions. So I think what we're trying to do is make sure that they have the fastest, most available route. The fire department always talks to me and says, be careful of what you put in the road to impede us. What if it's your relative who needs help, right? So I always kind of hear that in the back of my mind. And I'd also just say that the street is doing a lot of work as far as, again, not just single occupancy vehicles, but it's also the bike routes, the bus routes, the freight routes, the emergency vehicle routes, and then also typically the pedestrian routes as well on those sidewalks. So that right of way is doing a lot of work, and if the idea is to clear that, I think we're helping a lot of folks. But I think the idea of that statement that you read was about flipping the narrative as far as where resources go, and so we do have to think about how we clear trails and paths at the same time as we're doing these other clearing of events. But knowing that the street is kind of that number one priority for a lot of different modes, so we have to be cognizant of that.
Yeah, that makes it tricky. Now, you also mentioned transit in your presentation, and I think your plowing methodology included that clearing the curb lane is the final pass for the plows, and that opens areas in front of bus stops. But when you plow at the bus stops, you're pushing the snow out of the road onto the area where transit passengers have to try to access buses. And just anecdotally, the reason I asked you to come here is that the bus stop that I use has, on several occasions in recent years, required me to climb over or somehow get through significant accumulations of snow that had been plowed there. So I'm wondering if the responsible balance could somehow, and in some places in Longmont where there are a lot of pedestrians, or where we'd want to see a lot of pedestrians, whether we might have one fewer pass of the snow plows and then redirect the resources saved to clearing places like transit boarding areas and those ADA ramps at intersections that get plowed in and then turn into ice. What do you think of that idea?
Well, I'm never afraid of talking to staff about a different idea. I don't know that I can commit to it, but we can certainly, we can take a look at our operations and see what we might be able to achieve. But I would caution that there are, where do I pick our routes? There's a lot of bus stops in town. Again, I'll go back to, it just depends on what the event is like. And at one point, we could pull off a team to start doing some cleanup at some of these smaller areas. But again, I'd have to talk with staff about what the impacts on that operation would be. Mm-hmm. And if it's additional cost for some reason, it more than likely wouldn't be put into a budget until 2025, which we're fortunately right now working on.
Right,
So,
yeah.
but I have to see.
What
We'll have
I
to
was
talk about it.
suggesting was a reallocation rather than an additional budget.
And a reallocation on something like that might require different equipment, might require more manpower, and that if they're out there trying to clear off smaller areas, they do be doing it by hand. Or with, like I said, with smaller equipment, which we really don't have at the present time. Or we'd have to do contractor services similar to what Natural Resources does, because they have some smaller stuff.
Right. Now, you mentioned that Natural Resources clears the sidewalks on Main Street.
That's what their operations manual said.
I thought that the owners of the Main Street businesses were responsible.
I think that we coordinate with.
I've seen shop owners out there with shovels.
And all I only went with the snow and ice plan from operations, from Natural Resources operations that listed those areas in their plan. And, yeah, I forgot. I also, I had a graphic for what Public Works does. I couldn't get it to download in the presentation. So this is a graphic, I don't expect you to read it from there, of what the plan is and the priorities for Natural Resources. So I also printed out 8 copies, so you're more than welcome to take one. And that sums up, even though it's dated 21-22, that's the last time they updated their maps. But it is as current as we have. So I do have the graphic for what Natural Resources does. It does include those areas in downtown.
Mm-hmm. Also, in terms of putting pedestrians first, I have another suggestion. The Kaufman Street busway is taking shape. And I'm wondering if that area could become kind of a laboratory for looking at some different ways of clearing snow and ice in areas that have a lot of pedestrian activity. Now, I've personally witnessed snow removal in another Boulder County municipality that involved plowing to the center and then using loaders and trucks to haul the accumulated snow away. And I'm wondering if the city might give something like that a try on the Kaufman Street busway, just to see if it works.
So the city actually, in some instances, does undertake snow removal, usually in the downtown area, because we want to make sure the parking is cleared. If the storm is intense enough or drops a lot of snow.
Do you plow to the center? To do
So,
that?
well, no, we don't. I don't think we plow to the center. We plow to the side, and then we remove it. Okay, it is more intensive manpower operation. The other challenge is you got to find a place to store that snow and dump it. So we have a series of yards where we basically store it and let it melt. Last year, we almost ran out of free space around April. So we were looking around for other areas to just basically dump snow. Fortunately, some of the storms tailed off. You know, for most of our roadways, it's a pretty efficient operation. You look into snow removal, okay, which some cities do, simply because they don't have the area to store when they plow. It would require more manpower, more equipment, because while ours is a moving operation, that is a much slower operation. So you need the right equipment, which is front end loaders. You're going to have dump trucks to haul it away to continually move it. With the moving operation, we utilize, traffic continues to move. You plow into either the side of the road or front of the road. You got to operate it. You're going to be backing traffic up. There may be some areas of tight right-of-way in the future where we may need to do that in some of the urbanized areas as we continue to go denser. But for most of our roadways, that is not necessarily the most cost-effective or efficient
Right,
method
agreed,
for.
but what do you think of the idea of using the Kaufman Street busway and maybe parallel Main Street and Kimbark, parallel to the Kaufman Street corridor, as a place to look at some different ways of doing things, different operations that would focus on making it easy for pedestrians to move around?
I think there will be, with Kaufman, there will be a different operation priority for Kaufman Street. Simply because it's got the dual bike lane, it's got the bike lanes separated from the roadway, and then separated sidewalks. Plowing of the major roadway may continue, but there will need to be a different operation for the bike lanes, the bike paths, whatever you call them, and the sidewalks. What that would be, I don't know, but that's something we'll have to look at prior to opening of the roadway and be prepared for. So I'd anticipate that'll be a discussion in the coming budget cycle as we look ahead for operations of how we're going to achieve that.
Great, thanks for your consideration.
You know, overall, I just want to commend city staff and plowing in general, because I have plowed in my lifetime, and it's not fun. It's early hours, it's long days, it's sometimes doing your route 6-8 times because you're trying to catch up to the storm. Especially in some equipment where you just can't push that foot, so you got to just keep on going. So, you know, I would just like to commend staff. I think Board Member McInerney's comments are interesting. So, but overall, I do understand it's a funding issue, and hopefully as we grow as a city and our tax base increases, we can focus more on the natural resources. And then I would like to bring up one point is, you know, and this is kind of a little bit of, you know, disclosure. I do work in the downtown area. And I have heard some complaints over the last few storms, so just something to maybe relay to natural resources. I don't have a personal opinion about it because I usually wait till the snow melts. So, but thank you, and I commend staff.
So a lot of complaints came out of that Thanksgiving weekend storm we had. We mobilized in Public Works and Natural Resources. They have a different funding mechanism. And after 11 events last year, I was like the number 11th. They couldn't call in their contractors. So they waited to use city services after the holiday. And we heard about it. They are aware of the issues. So we have been discussing it with them. No need to pass it on.
All right.
We made it aware, made them aware.
All right. Thank you, Jim.
It's also one of the reasons why the downtown business owners have shovels.
I have a few comments and questions. As a pedestrian and bicyclist year-round, I often encounter issues with the snow removal, and I appreciate that you have a very difficult job and you have to prioritize the fire lanes and the transit, but there isn't a large priority on other users, it doesn't feel like, and I think that's what board member McInerney was trying to get at, that accessibility for pedestrians and bicyclists is definitely a second priority and not even, maybe even considered at all. Like, a lot of the routes are never plowed at all and they become very, very icy, and I've encountered black ice. I've slipped on the black ice because even on the greenway, which is plowed, it's still never clear. So, I don't know, just another thought about the way that you clear some of those greenways would be kind of a new thought, because some of those areas, like, even if you plow it, it doesn't take it all the way, and then pedestrians and bicyclists don't melt the road like the same as a car would, because they don't have the same heat, and so that snow and ice can sit there for days or weeks, and it just becomes like a black ice basically spot, especially in the north areas which never get any sun. Like, there's a couple of places on the greenway that it's pretty much just covered in snow the whole year, the whole snow season, and I had to get off my bike and walk it through because I don't want to slide off. So there's definitely some spots that need a little bit more attention. And I'd also say some of the ramps onto the greenway are never cleared. So it's all very well clearing the greenway, but if you can't get on it or off it, it doesn't really help that much. And some of I understand you just do the downtown greenways, but what about the other greenways in Lamont? Because there's several on the peripheries, which is still utilized by pedestrians and cyclists, but I don't think they're ever cleared. And so they are always a danger for pedestrians and bicyclists. And my other thought was also about the building up of snow when you do clear a road. A lot of the time, as Board Member McInerney was saying, was the snow builds up in front of where you're supposed to be exiting off a sidewalk. And so then you end up with a mound of snow and ice, but sometimes it's impassable. So if a wheelchair user was going to be coming along, they literally wouldn't be able to cross the road because there's a foot of snow right in front of where they're supposed to be crossing. So even if the road is completely clear, there's a pile of snow right in front of where they're supposed to be crossing. And that's something that could be done maybe in a later pass of snow clearing, but a lot of the time it's never cleared. And it accumulates over the season, and it just gets bigger and bigger, it gets more compacted, and I think it's kind of a safety issue, because those users can't actually use the sidewalks, and even if the sidewalk is clear, there's still a big pile of snow there. So, and then I guess my question would be, why do you only clear half of the bike path and bike lanes?
So, to clarify my comment, where there are parked cars is where we only would plow half the bike lane. If there's no cars parked there, or it's like on 9th Avenue, just a standard bike lane adjacent to the road, we'll plow to the curb. But we'll plow half the bike lane should there be parking and cars actually in that lane. We really don't, in the city, don't have like a system where I grew up in the southeast Pennsylvania area. They used to have snow emergency routes that are all noted with signs, and that if you park there, you get a ticket, you get towed. Longmont doesn't have that. So, should we do that? Could we look at that? Possibly, but Parking is always a very sensitive subject, even in a snowstorm and an emergency. So that was the intention, is that we would only plow half the bike lane where there's a parked car, because we don't want to plow the car in.
So what do you do when you have a bike lane that's right up against the curb?
They plow to the curb line, pretty much. That's what I understand it. I'm going to have Matt come up and he can explain that.
Yeah, a lot of the time it's not cleared. Like that's where the snow ends up sitting, is in the bike lane.
Yeah, and a lot of the time we get the snow that comes back from the sidewalks, they get cleared back into the bike lane. So it ends up shuffle trying to get that snow sidewalk cleared back in. It's just a lack of storage.
Okay. That's maybe the case sometimes, but a lot of the places, like especially if there's a gap between like where the sidewalk ends and there's like maybe a grassy area, and then there's the road, there's still snow in the bike lane that's along the edge.
Yeah, our instructions for the staff is to clear to the curb if there's no parked cars, so that's our intent, and that's what we try to do.
Yeah, there's many a road that is not that way, unfortunately. And it makes it very dangerous for me to move around the city because I'm skidding and sliding on the ice and on my bike.
Yeah, we'll
So-
make note. We go out and check afterwards, check the storms, check bike lanes.
So yeah, our supervisors do go out during events and after events to make sure that we're doing our job adequately. If you identify places, what I encourage you to do is call Public Works or send us an email on Service Works. Let us know where those are at. Okay, I think you all have my contact information. I get calls and emails from council about hotspots throughout. Matt had to deal with one just a week ago over in Prospect. So if you see them, identify them. If you don't want to do Service Works, you can pop me an email or call the office, and we'll take a look at it and we'll get it fixed.
Okay. I can definitely do that. I have submitted it to Service Works before, and sometimes it's addressed and sometimes it's not addressed.
So Matt doesn't know this yet, but starting this in January, I will get all the transportation service requests in a spreadsheet to follow up. And if I see some that aren't addressed, we'll get them fixed.
Okay. So I know you do the downtown sidewalks, but what about like after like you've done the initial removal? What about like the other city, like down Hoover and some of those other places that are still used quite heavily by pedestrians, but are not like directly in downtown?
So some of the arterial rights of way are undertaken by natural resources, and that you grab a map, take a look at it. It's got a guide on it, key on it. Some of those areas are still the responsibility of the adjacent property owners. Not all of them are done by natural resources. We always have a challenge in front of schools. The Catholic school across the street does a fantastic job. Got to tell you, they go out there and they're done real quick. Some of the other schools are not on some of the collectors. So, again, natural resources is usually lagging a little bit. Like I said, our guys are out in the middle of a storm. They'll wait sometimes till after an event when things start moving again, and they play catch up. So that's their operations. It's worked for them. Might not always be the best from a customer service perspective for trying to move, on a bike around the city. So I don't necessarily have an answer about how we can improve that, other than talking to them about priorities and seeing what we can move up. Again, it's going to be for them a funding mechanism. Streets fund, 3/4 cent sales tax funds almost all of our operations in Public Works. Natural Resources has got to compete with the general fund, and usually they lose. So just so you're aware of the politics in the city.
Sorry, I'm not trying to like be really complaining, but it's just,
No.
it's just, I mean, I have fallen down and fallen on the black ice.
I understand,
so
and
it's just not very.
like I said, we plow 146 miles. There are 357 miles in the city of Longmont that we have to maintain. So we don't have eyes everywhere. We do the best we can with it, and we encourage residents to tell us about those issues and problems on any level, whether it's snow, whether it's ice, whether it's potholes. whether it's drainage problems. If we aren't made aware of them through our regular driving through the city and patrols, then we won't know to fix them. So I encourage everybody to try to use ServiceWorks because we keep those there in an email form, and we keep it as a record. So we'll know if and then we can always track to see if our staff has addressed those adequately.
Okay, so in submitting requests to ServiceWorks, they're not always addressed, and then it's just closed.
Well, I can't speak to what's happened in the past. I can only commit to trying to do a better job in the future.
Okay, yeah. I'm honestly not trying to be like super complaining, but like because the city is trying to move towards multimodal, and I mean we have to consider pedestrians and bicyclists as well as cars. So, and yeah, okay, thank you.
Well, I just want to say thank you for all you do. I think many people don't understand that we are understaffed, under budget, and they can only do with what they have. And I do understand, and I'm defending staff because I know what goes on in the city, and I know how hard they work. But I also know they have had complaints about the public service works phone number where people call in and they said they felt like their issues weren't being addressed, and I know that you all were working on that. So that is being addressed, but I also want the board to understand that we are having a deficit with employees across the city. And if you have over 300 roads that you have to get through in a storm, as a pedestrian or a driver, it's very difficult to get to those areas as well as those who are driving the trucks. So, and I guess because I'm from Chicago, I understand. I never even thought, I forgot all about the signs that we used to have on the side of the road. Like if you park here, you're getting towed. So that may be something we may need to address too. And I know the parking issue. That's gonna be an issue forever, ever, ever, ever. We're gonna be year 200, and Longmont people still gonna be complaining about parking. But those are some of the things that maybe we can address, putting up signs in certain areas, especially where pedestrians and bikers, bike, to make sure that they have a pathway where there are restrictions for the drivers, the plowers to plow because of people are parked there. But I will say, my own experience, because I walk every day, that's just something I do, and I rent in an area where we have a HOA, and it's horrible. But I'll make sure I get to the greenway or the trails, and I can walk. And I get my walk in on the trails and not get it on the sidewalk because I'm scared I'm going to fall. So I just think it just depends on what area of the town you live in and what they're able to do, when they're able to do it. Maybe I went out after they did it, I don't know. But, I mean, people were jogging out there, and, I mean, they had whatever, they were half frozen, beards were frozen. I was like, really? But they were jogging out there. So I just want to say that I understand the frustration for those who bike and for those pedestrian, and we are trying to be more pedestrian friendly, and I do understand that, but we also have to understand the staff and the challenges that they have and the barriers that they have. But I do agree with the line when someone calls, we need to some kind of way let them know that it has been resolved, or we're sending someone out there, not just close the account, because I myself has heard that complaint. But I know you all are out there doing the work, so I appreciate everything that you do. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, too. Matt? I guess, we'll start with Board Member Kim. If you want to make any comments for tonight's session.
It's been very informative. I learned a lot. And Phil, do you have any more of these cards on you tonight?
I do not, but I can get them pretty quickly. I gave a lot to Taylor, so maybe he has some to share.
No further comments. Thank you.
It was a great meeting. I appreciate the information about Northwest Rail and also the city's snow and ice update. So thanks very much to staff. I asked all my questions during those two presentations, so nothing further.
Yes, it was really refreshing to hear a comment from the public. I wish Ross could have been here to hear that. I'd certainly take what he has to say seriously. It's one of the main reasons why I am sitting here today on the board, and I'm adamant on keeping track of how we could continue to increase access to public transportation. And I'm very excited to see this summer what is held with the success of the microtransit, but I'm also very aware of the cuts to the Bolt. It's still only at 66% of the operation of where it was in 2019, and we're still waiting to see if the Route J or LX will ever come. And so, so I'm glad to hear public also interested in increasing our access to public transportation. And that is all I have for comment.
Just thank you for the presentations. Otherwise, no comment. Have a nice night.
I know I did a lot of complaining, but I'm really just trying to increase awareness of all the various issues. I totally appreciate that it's a very difficult, you do a very difficult job and with limited funds, and I do appreciate that Longmont even has this ability to listen to comments from its citizens, which I super appreciate. And I really I agreed a lot with the public commenter who came in with what he was saying, because I've experienced that exact same problem myself, and I always will hope for better RTD services and more reliable and on time, and just more routes would be nice as well, because I personally used to use the J every day, and now it no longer exists, and I've used the LX many times, and now that no longer exists, so maybe one day we'll have those routes back. But I just wanted to say thank you for everything you're doing, and I do appreciate everything you do.
Okay. I do want to say I also agree with Ross, because I used to take the bus to Boulder all the time, but because of my job in Boulder, I had to drive because it takes too long to get to Boulder, and then on the way coming back, especially as a single mom with kids, and you have to be here. And I do know that I used to be very fearful of my son. He used to go to school at Fairview in Boulder, and then take the bus back to Longmont, and when he would get done with football practice and everything, he would have to walk so far, because we used to live by Pace and 3rd in that area, and so he would have to walk to get from the nearest bus stop to get home at night. And being a black male, and he would walk in the door and he would have his hoodie on, and I would be furious. And he has the right to wear a hoodie, but we all know that black men in America that wear a hoodie are targets. And I'm not saying our police department are like that, but it's still, you never know what can happen with neighbors or in the neighborhood. So I was very fearful of my son walking through the neighborhood at night because getting off the bus from wherever could get off the bus and walk through neighborhoods was very dangerous for me as a mom. So we have to do better with bus routes, and especially one of the main reasons why I got on the transportation, I wanted to be on there, was we need to have a stop at every school, because again, as a single mom, my daughter will be at Altona at the middle school, and she will be after school and with activities, and I work in Boulder and then have to hurry up and come home, and she's sitting out on the curb waiting on me. That's scary. Same thing when she was at Niwot. I know you said we have those micro transit or another bus that will come. We need public transportation where teenagers can hop on that bus and get to where they need to be across the city. And that's very important. So I hope that we can work on that, making sure that at least at the schools stops that our students will have a way to get on the bus and get home. And we also need to have bus stops in neighborhoods around the city for those kids who are, for me, not even for the kids, but for parents like me. So, thank you.
Just want to reiterate, thanks for all the information tonight and all the comments from the board. I think it all, as we all know, is a balancing act. And Jim, I know you're spinning a lot of plates different parts of the year, whether it's budget, whether it's a weather event, it's always a challenge. And I would concur with creating more equity as it relates to public transportation. And I know, again, that's a challenge because we have RTD that we have to deal with. And we can't take on that, obviously, because of the economics of it. So I think we just keep pushing up this rock up the hill as we go along with it. So thank everybody for their comments. And again, staff and all the work that you do. So we'll go ahead and if I can get a motion to close. Next. Sorry, items for next.
Yeah, real quickly, we've mentioned a number of items coming up in the next couple months, but next month specifically is the US 287 Vision Zero Safety and Mobility Study recommendations from Boulder County. So they'll be coming next month for their input, and I think that on top of micromobility, we'll have a quick update for you for microtransit. So in March, those will be the two items that we have planned right now.
Okay, then I'll move.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? No? Okay, thank you. Good night.